easy access to things that you could have seen in a law library. So it's not like I had any secret documents I was accessing. It just made it easier. But after this 2-year period, I surprisingly, I came to the conclusion that what she was claiming about the income tax and how even it was married with the, kind of joined at the hip with the monetary system and all these kinds of things, I really had to conclude that she was onto something. And of course, for me, having taken an oath to support and defend the Constitution, having been raised by parents that, raised me not to steal from people or to help others steal from people, coming to the realization that, when people earn their money, it's their money, it's their property. And only by operation of an actual law passed by Congress that is a representative of the people and signed by the president that's elected by the people, that's the only way that a law can then deprive them of that property, by following a course of due process of law. So it was finding all of these holes basically in the due process of law, finding all the holes in actual statutory authority for the IRS to do many of the things it did, at least in relation to the income tax. The IRS does enforce many other taxes, and I didn't find any problems there, but where I did find huge problems was in the enforcement and administration of the federal income tax.
So around 1999, you come out with this report, this investigating the federal income tax, a preliminary report. What happens when you submit that?
Well, when I got to this end of this kind of a 2-year period of fact-finding, I thought to myself, okay, now I've got this tiger by the tail. I mean, there's some really ugly things here that I've discovered, and I certainly can't go on doing my job as I always have until I get these resolved. So I thought, well, I'm going to put together some of the highlights of what I've encountered and put it into a cohesive, white paper report that I can present so that I'll make some sense rather than just sitting there ad-libbing, about all I had gone through over the last 2 years. So I put together this 95-page report, and I also prepared a very professional transmittal letter along with it that basically explained why I had created the report, why I was submitting the report. And the basic message was, my entire professional life is built around the income tax. There couldn't be a bigger skeptic, but yet I've taken the time to investigate these claims, and there's a lot of very, chilling and uncomfortable conclusions that I've come to, at least preliminary conclusions. I'm not a Supreme Court justice or a lawyer, but, I'm a certified public accountant. You trust me to carry this gun and badge around every day. I have some level of competence. You should at least hear what I have to say. So I presented the report and this transmittal letter, both of which you can see like on freedomabovefortune.com or agentfortruth.com. Read it for yourself. It was basically a very humble, presentation just saying, hey, this is what I've found, and you guys all took the same, guys and gals, took the same oath that I did. You have the same responsibility as I do. So just as uncomfortable as it might be for you, surely we can all put our heads together and figure out, how I could have come to these conclusions. And their response was pretty rapid. Within a day or two, what I had done is I'd asked that the report itself and my concerns be forwarded up the chain of command of the IRS, up to including the commissioner.
Hold that thought. When we come back, folks, we'll continue our conversation with Joe Banister, because this is where it gets good. You're listening to the Freedomlink Radio on the Orion Talk Radio Network. Don't go away. The income tax, folks. What a touchy subject it certainly is. We're joined by Joe Banister, former IRS special agent and whistleblower, and we're talking right now about the report that he generated and the response that he got from his superiors. And I would assume the response that you got from your superiors, Joe, was probably not what you expected.
Yes and no. I mean, I as I said before the break, I asked that the report and transmittal letter be forwarded up the chain of command, up to and including the IRS commissioner. Within a little less than 2 days, I was called into my chief's office, which now they're called a special agent in charge, just like the other federal law enforcement agencies. And the special agent in charge looked at me like I had two heads and said, are you really serious about these concerns? And I told him that I was dead serious about it, and that I had, sincere concerns about what I had researched, and I was simply looking for some of these other colleagues, peers, to tell me what's going on. Mm-hmm. So his response was that, Joe, what I'm about to do, I've been instructed to do. And what he did was hand me a very short memorandum that said, we are not going to address any of your questions or concerns, and we will provide you with the paperwork necessary to tender your resignation.
Oh, good Lord.
So that was basically the response. And then immediately thereafter, my firearm I had to turn in my firearm, and I was sent home for a week of administrative leave. So they didn't fire me, but they sent me home for a week of administrative leave, and to basically consider what my next move would be. So I went home and had to dodge the frying pan of my wife.
I can only imagine. I can only imagine.
After all the suffering that I put my family through to become an IRS special agent, and then coming home and saying, honey, the income tax is a scam, at least in terms of the way it's enforced. And I just, kind of waved the flag saying, hey, what's going on here? And they've sent me home. So I might have to resign. And a week later, I did resign. Basically, I figured that I had earned a very good reputation there. And I wanted to keep that reputation intact, because I felt that the only way that I'd ever be believed is if I had a good reputation. And if I stayed around there and let them destroy my reputation, which I had seen evidence of them doing to other people, that it might be a better idea for the long term and long-term credibility to resign. So I did resign. It was February 25th, 1999, which just so happened to be my birthday. And I also learned that I share a birthday with the federal income tax, because on February 25th, 1913, the Secretary of State, whose name was Philander Knox, proclaimed that the 16th Amendment was ratified. Of course, there's evidence strongly indicated that it was not ratified, but it was proclaimed to be ratified on February 25th, 1913. And I was born 50 years later on February 25th, 1963. And then I resigned on February 25th, 1999.
Wow. So it was like karma.
Yeah, well, I'm Catholic, but I don't believe in karma, but I do believe that God has a destiny for us all. And
let me ask you this. So the income tax, it is, we all seem to be subject to it. And if you don't pay it, it's kind of like the mafia coming and breaking your leg if you don't pay the tribute, So what is it about the income tax that you found out to be not right?
Well, basically, kind of like I alluded to before, in terms of a circle, if you could just picture a circle that, the IRS can't go beyond the line of the circle. And that circle are the statutes, the laws that our Congress has passed over the years since 1913, when the 16th Amendment was allegedly ratified. Mm-hmm. And so the IRS or the FBI or any agency, I would hope most Americans still can see from a common sense perspective that government agencies are required to obey the law just like us. And the laws are very specific about what can be taxed, who can be taxed, how it is taxed. It's very, very explicit. And so what I found, I should say what I validated, because I didn't do any independent, finding some big pot of gold.
Right. You were a skeptic.
I was a skeptic. I was just looking and trying to basically debunk these people who claim that, the average American isn't even liable to pay the income tax, that there's no statute in the entire thick Internal Revenue Code that makes the average American liable, that the average American who's just working for a living, trading their time for a paycheck, is not making any income, because the word income actually has a constitutional definition. And
really?
it's not as wide as people think it is. Now, people think that income is basically everything, right? I mean, the IRS certainly includes it or considers it to be everything.
Not much that's held back from that, that's for sure.
Right, but constitutionally, the 16th Amendment, the language of it actually uses the word incomes. And so there was some Supreme Court cases after the 16th Amendment came into play, and the Supreme Court ruled that the Congress does not have the power to define income, because income is used in the Constitution, right? So if Congress could define a term in the Constitution, well, then they could just say income is everything. So
right.
It says Section 2500. Okay, so that again it's common sense. So the Supreme Court said Supreme Court can define what income is, and the Supreme Court did define it in numerous Supreme Court cases that came from about 1916 till the 30s and even later. That income is a gain or an accession to wealth. And when you work for a living and you trade an hour of time for an hour of pay, there's no gain there. But the way that the IRS pretends or portends that there is a gain is they will tell you that you have zero basis, you have zero value to your labor. So to give you just a real brief example, if you make $20 an hour, you'd think that, well, wait, my pay must be worth $20 for an hour of work because that's what they're paying me, right? That's the fair market value.
Sure.
And so you give them 20 hours worth of work, they give you $20. There's no gain there. But what the IRS does is they say that hour of work that you gave is worth zero. And the $20 that you got is your proceeds or your gross income. And so $20 that you received minus the zero that your labor is worth, that your work is worth, leaves $20 of gain. Now, does that sound kind of screwy? Now, if you hire...
it's a sham, yeah, that's what that is.
Yeah, so if you hire someone else and they do work for you, amazingly, if you hire someone else for $20 an hour, the IRS lets you consider their work to be worth $20. But when you work for your own money, it's not worth $20.
Wow. Gwen, you've been doing a lot of research in this arena. What do you have to say with or speak to Joe about?
Well, I'm curious about, because I know everything operates in commerce, under the Uniform Commercial Code. So my question is, are we being dragged into court and afraid to pay our taxes based on, we're voluntary taxpayers. So when do we become a criminal tax evader? And then I realized we're putting our signature on a W-4 form when we get any job. And so that's our contract. So are we in violation because we violated a contract to be a voluntary taxpayer, or do we really owe these jackbooted thugs money?
Well, in my opinion, we definitely, many times, very, very